Hey everyone, I've got another Smart Marketing for Small Nonprofits podcast episode for you that I'd love for you to tune in to learn about what are the most important metrics that you need to be measuring in order to really get the impact that you're looking for. As nonprofit marketers, oftentimes we want to make sure that we're in as many places as possible, thinking that that's going to generate the awareness that we need. But the truth is you want to be in the places that really work for you, and the only way that you're going to be able to identify that is to measure the metrics. So give a listen to today's podcast. I share many golden nuggets as to how you can go about that process so that you know when you are spending time in each area of marketing that you are spending the right time in the right places. So that's what today's podcast is all about. I hope you enjoy. You're listening to the Smart Marketing for Small Nonprofits podcast, episode number 69. Hi there. I hope you had an incredible week last week and that today is going just as well. Thank you for spending some time with me. Can you believe it is the last week of January? Just like that, the month is almost over. It's hard to believe, I know. And over the past few weeks, we have been talking about programs and initiatives for your nonprofit that could help in your outreach and your bottom line, those year-end campaigns, starting monthly donation programs, which was a really hot topic, and even finding inspiration for your marketing message from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, a special podcast that I just released during the holiday weekend last week. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend that you take a little time to do so. I share some really great communications insights from his speech that we as nonprofit marketers, I believe, can use to inspire people to take action, as we know Dr. King did so incredibly well. Today, however, I'm going to ask you to take a step back and think about how you measure whether your messaging and your outreach is getting you the awareness and support that your nonprofit deserves. Yes, my friends, we venture into the world of marketing metrics. Now, for those of you who love looking at the analytics, I sometimes do and I sometimes don't, but diving into the numbers, that's what we're going to do today. This is going to be right up your alley. But I suspect that at least some of you, most of our creative minds, perhaps are not fans of metrics. And if you fall into this category, I'm going to ask you to stick with me for this podcast and give me a chance to convince you why this is so incredibly important for the life and health of your nonprofit. So I've noticed that there tends to be a couple of reasons that metrics get dismissed by nonprofit professionals. The first is that sometimes the numbers look meaningless. Okay, visits to the website dropped off last month, but maybe you don't have a corresponding event that would explain why that happened. So it's just a frustrating fact that you can't make heads or tail of. I know I found myself in that predicament many times. So, what are you supposed to do with that? And it's true, not all data is equal in its usefulness to you, which is why today's podcast is going to focus on the metrics that matter, the ones that you can actually do something about. I hope that excites you because, numbers, they are all abound when we talk about digital marketing, and we can sometimes get mechanical about listing those numbers, but not really taking that information to the level that can really benefit our organization. The other reason I think nonprofit marketers shy away from metrics is this looming feeling that somehow those results are judging you, which is great if the numbers tell you what you want to hear and they align with your goals, but not so great. In fact, kind of terrible if your numbers are missing the mark, right? If fear of the metrics is what's stopping you from reviewing those numbers, I think that you need to develop a new perspective on what metrics are. The numbers aren't a judge making a pronouncement that you are a good or bad marketer. I really want you to grab hold of that perspective because that's what we're going to dive into today. Really getting your head around those numbers in a way that's going to make you a smarter marketer and benefit your organization. Because all they are, particularly if you're focusing on those numbers that matter, all they are a tool. They are just a tool that you can use. I've said this before, but sometimes marketing feels like what I call the black box experiment. You create an appeal or an email or a call to action, there's a result, but you're mystified sometimes by what happens in the middle. It works or it doesn't, but you have no idea why. Well, metrics allow you to peer into that black box and get a clue about what is happening, which in turn gives you options to change elements of your marketing to better reach your goals. So, let's start talking about the metrics that matter. How does that sound? And what you can do about them. So I wanted to break this into 3 buckets. There are a lot of different metrics that we can look at, but again, we're talking about metrics that matter. So I've got it broken down into 3 buckets: your website, your emails, and your social media platforms. So we're going to focus on those 3 metrics in those areas to see what it is that they can do for you. The first bucket of numbers, like I said, your website metrics. We're tackling this one first because in most cases, your website is your base of your digital operations. It's where you have your donation page or link to your donation platform. It's where you tell your story, probably most fully, and it's where you give people the opportunity to learn about you and engage with you, whether it's by giving you money or signing up for a newsletter or even becoming a volunteer. It's where, for the most part, you connect with your clients as well. Now, there are nonprofits that only work from their social media pages, this I know, but those tend to be far and few between. And honestly, I don't think there's many in our nonprofit marketing audience here. So I think it is still the best place to start in measuring your metrics. And by that, I mean, take a look at your Google Analytics. I know when I say Google Analytics, it feels like this big place where you need to go. Just the word Google alone might scare you off, but Google Analytics is free and it will give you the insights you need for your most vital website metrics. And if you haven't looked at it before, it will give you a baseline so that you can set goals for improvements and then measure them. Also, it's good to know that you don't need an IT department to set it up and download the info that you need. Google Help pages, I've got to say, they are pretty darn good at explaining what you need to do. But I'm going to walk you through what it is that I think are the most important metrics to look at. The first thing to look at is to find out how people are finding your website, or what is known as website traffic sources within Google Analytics. It's good to know where people are coming from, right? So Google Analytics can let you know where your visitors are coming from, and they do so in a few different ways. And here's the ones that I really want you to pay attention to. Number 1 is organic search. These are folks who find you because they entered a phrase on a search engine like Google, but it can be other search engines as well. And when they entered that phrase, your website popped up. If you're seeing low organic numbers within your Google Analytics report, it might be because your website doesn't have key terms that individuals are searching for, or because the search engine is having a hard time of finding your site because it isn't optimized. Now, I won't get into the long discussion on how to improve your search engine optimization today, but I will let you know that I did do a deep dive on the topic of SEO recently in the podcast, and I'll have a link to that podcast on today's show notes page. But right now, I'll just share a Cliff Notes version of what you can do to improve SEO. So if you have a website that's based on a WordPress platform, as most nonprofits are, I really want you to do yourself a favor and install Yoast. It's free and it will literally tell you what you need to do to make your website more searchable page by page and post by post. So that's Yoast, Y-O-A-S-T. It's a plugin that you can install, and that will give you some great insight. Another metric to pay attention to for website traffic is referral traffic. That's when people are directed to your site through another website. This is also referred to as what I'm sure you've heard before as backlinks. Those can come from lots of different places. So for instance, if you did a media release and it was listed on, say, your newspaper's website, the digital version, with a link to your website, that would be a backlink source. Or if you do, say, a guest blog on someone else's site. Another example, if, say, your local United Way partners with you and includes your website on a list of the agencies that they fund, that would be another way that you could get some referral traffic. So when you look at this number, see what external sites are driving the most traffic to your site. And you can also look at how long these visitors are staying on the page that they land on. If that page has a call to action, like perhaps a donate button or a volunteer or newsletter sign up form, you can measure if they convert and do what you've asked them to do. If not, this gives you the insight you need to change things up. Maybe you reframe that call to action message or add a different image to it, or even place it somewhere else at the top of the page or on the sidebar. Remember, you've got information you can use here to test and try different approaches until you find what works. The last source you can look at for this metric is social media traffic. What platforms are driving visitors to your site? And if those visitors are taking the action that you're asking. If your Facebook posts are converting, but tweets aren't moving the needle, that will give you guidance on what platforms you should be spending your time on, or maybe adjust the strategy in which you're using them. So Google Analytics will not only talk about where your audience is coming from, but where it goes to once visitors land on your website. This gives you the ability to check which pages are the most popular and then the information that you need to optimize them. Because if you don't, there's something a bit more concerning that might happen, and I want to share with you how you can analyze it. You'll want to take a look at how long people are staying on your site or each popular page that they might be landing on. If they are immediately leaving within a few seconds, you've got a problem. But it's a problem that you can fix when you know what's happening. It can be that there is a disconnect between what your visitor thought they would see on your site and what's actually there. Does the page answer the question that they Googled, or is it relevant to the link from the other website you found that was driving the traffic? Or does it look good on a mobile device? These are the questions that you can ask to fix that problem, because the longer people stay on each page of your website, the more likely they're going to engage with your nonprofit. And as I mentioned, Google Analytics will also measure the conversion rate if you have a call to action. So for instance, does your visitor complete your donation form or register for an event or download a resource? If they are getting there to any of those pages but then not completing the action, again, it's time to look at what you've got going on. So here are a few more details that you can drill down on to address a few of those call to action conversion problems that you might be experiencing. Now, first and foremost, let's consider your donation page, right? It is probably the most important page on your website. And I want you to ask the question, if it's not converting, is your donation form too complicated? This is by far the number one reason people tend to abandon donation pages. So be sure to look at your donation page conversion rate and then change things up if that number is too low. I have an awesome resource to help you with it if you discover donation page conversions are in fact a problem that you need to address. It's my donation page essentials guide that we constantly use when working with any nonprofit to make sure they get the best conversions possible when people get to that all-important donation page. You can download the donation page checklist that I've created that also includes some samples of high converting donation pages simply by going to my website, cindymaymarketing.com, and I've got that freebie for you right on the home page. Okay, moving on. Let's consider, what if people aren't registering for an event that you're linking to? The message just isn't getting the clicks and the signups that you want and need. You could consider where the button is placed or the size of that call to action button. Is it small or hidden so far down the scroll that people don't even see it? This is information that you can use to improve performance. See what your baseline is using Google Analytics, and if there are tweaks you can make to maybe SEO or the design or layout of your landing pages that will improve those metrics, you can do so when you know the numbers. So now let's move on to another element of your nonprofit's digital presence and how the numbers can help you become more impactful. And this is your emails, the second bucket that I mentioned that I'd like to discuss. Because the truth is, email continues to be one of the most valuable channels for nonprofit outreach and engagement. And the great news is that most e-communication platforms, whether you use Constant Contact or MailChimp or some other platform, they typically have analytical tools built right into their programs, so you don't have to hunt for an outside solution to get the metrics you need. However, the first tool I'm going to have you look at is on a separate site, and it's one that I suggest that you review before you send out any of your emails, because it's one of the biggest issues we've seen with emails for nonprofits, and that includes the bounces, because the email is getting classified as spam. And you just don't want that to happen. But there's an easy way to check out your spam score, and it's called mailtester.com. So the actual URL is mail, M-A-I-L, and then it's a dash tester.com. And I will, of course, have a link to it on the show notes page. But let me just give you a quick overview of how this works. You would simply just open up the site, again, mailtester.com. It's a real simple landing page with this real friendly picture of a tree and a sun and a welcome message that says, test the spamminess of your emails. It's actually kind of cute. And then it has an email address to send a test version of your email to. You go to your platform and send a test to that email. But here's the thing, be sure not to close out the mailtester.com site. If you refresh it or close and reopen it, you'll have to start the process all over again. In about a minute after you send your test email, you go back to mailtester.com and the tab and click on Check Your Score button, and it will tell you if your email is ready to go or if it needs some work. There are a bunch of things that it's going to be looking for. Is the site that you're sending your email from authenticated? That is it a legitimate site? Do your pictures have alt tag descriptions? Do you have embedded elements that might be problematic? Do you have a clear unsubscribed option? These are all things that are going to affect your score and identify whether or not it's going to be considered spam. And that is really important to know if you want to make sure that your emails do the work that you want them to do. All right, so after you've identified whether your emails have a spam problem or not, there are some other stats that I want you to consider. It's really important to take a look at your open rates. You really can't tell your story or get engagement going if your subscribers aren't opening your emails. Now, open rates, depending on your sector, can range all over the place. The latest stats that I've seen on this from the 2020 report from Campaign Monitor showed an average for all sectors at about 17%, but government entities and nonprofits, they tend to get the highest open rates, a little over 20% for both, which is nice. So if you're seeing low open rates, there are some simple solutions that you can try, and the first thing is your subject line. So here are a few things that you can do regarding that. Score your subject line. There are a bunch of free subject line analysis tools out there. My favorite comes from CoSchedule. So you can play around with your words. Think about using emojis or avoid words that turn off readers and include ones that drive opens. When you use a subject line analysis tool, they will give you this kind of insight. But also make sure those messages, regardless of their score, that they're relevant to your nonprofit's mission. A lot of people will go wrong. They'll get caught up in the score, and then the message isn't relevant. And that's not good because you will get many opt-outs with that kind of approach. You might want to also explore personalization, either by including the recipient's name in the subject line or in the preview text that they will also see in their inboxes. Another thing that will affect open rates is whether your subscriber list is up to date. I really recommend that you do an audit and get rid of those inactive subscribers or lapsed donors that might be pulling your open rates down. Now, I know this is kind of hard. People don't like to see their list numbers go down, but it's an option. You can have your list number go down or your open rate, which is more important. Regarding lapsed donors, however, I suggest that you segment them into their own list or group so that you can send them an email that is directly related to them, a "we want you back" kind of approach. That way you don't close the door permanently, but you don't let them affect the metrics on your regular email outreach. Finally, think about when you are sending your emails and don't be afraid to change that if necessary. For one of our clients, the golden rule used to be that we would send out emails either on Tuesday or Thursday at a certain time. However, we noticed that a lot of nonprofits in our area were doing that too. So we knew that the inboxes were getting kind of crowded because a lot of nonprofits in a small town are going to have people who are on the same list. So we switched their distribution date to Friday. And that little change, it really did help to increase their open rates. Another metric to consider is your click-through rate, which will help show engagement levels. Are they opening up the links or clicking through to the links on your pages, either your blog or on your donation page, or maybe to a petition that you might have listed? And this is where segmentation is your friend. Make sure you are sending the right message at the right time to the right subscriber. Does your call to action fit with the person who's on your list? For example, if someone has just donated to you, you don't want to include them in your next Please Donate campaign. It will just make it look like you weren't paying attention. On the other hand, if you see that you have a group of donors who are giving small amounts several times during the year but aren't monthly donors, maybe it's time to send them a special message suggesting a monthly donation program just for them. And then lastly, your email conversion rate will help guide you as you work to turn email recipients into, say, donors or volunteers or even advocates. And if you see a gap between engagement and conversion, they click on the donate here button on your email, but they never fill out the form, you need to go back to your landing pages and make sure that they are optimal. That's where you find a great synergy between the metrics that we are measuring. Using your email platform and Google Analytics, you can see who is landing on your page from your email campaigns and what happens once they get to your site. That will let you know which email campaigns are resulting in the most conversions or completions, and that can help drive future campaigns. It is smart marketing at its finest. Now, before we dive in and explore our third metrics bucket that is all about social media, I wanted to tell you a little story about a group of nonprofits that I work with that are part of a coalition to encourage people to donate to charities because of the benefits they will get on their state taxes. So I was at a recent meeting with the group and I asked them what social media channels they were using. Now, this was a whole bunch of nonprofits that were in the room of, different areas of focus. And I have to tell you that most of them were raising their hands when I was calling out the different social media channels, and they were using about 5 or more channels. So it was Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, some were on Snapchat, and even YouTube videos. And, really the list goes on and on when we start talking about social media channels. And I just named those channels, so it might have been even more that they were using. There are so many social media options, but the question is, do you really need them all? And here's the insight that I gathered when I asked the group if they were getting good response from all of those channels. They basically said not so much, with the exception of Facebook. And that makes sense. Facebook is still the biggest one out there, but it feels like every day there are more and more tweaks to the algorithm that make it difficult for organizations to make it into the Facebook newsfeed. Now, I'm not saying don't include social media, and I'm not saying limit the channels that you use. What I am saying is don't guess which social media channels you should be using. Make informed decisions by looking at the back-end analytics. What is your reach and your impressions? And do you know the difference between those terms? Most of you will, but if you've ever wondered, reach is the unique viewer and impressions is the total number of times something is seen. So if I look at a post of yours 3 times, I would count as 1 reach but 3 impressions. It's kind of like the difference between page views and unique visitors on your website. Look at the likes, shares, comments your posts create on Facebook, or the reactions and or retweets of your post on Twitter. Are your Instagram posts driving folks to your bio page and therefore to the link on your website? These are insights you can gather from each platform. If your statistics are good, that's awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. If not, here are a few other things that I want you to consider. For all social media channels, it's really important that you enlist your board, staffers, or even volunteers and ask them to share or comment or otherwise engage with your post. On most social media platforms, it's engagement that triggers the analytics of the newsfeed and makes your post more visible. For Facebook, video is still a huge winner. It's simple, it's authentic, and it captures people's attention. For Instagram, make sure to mention other accounts and employ hashtags to maximize engagement and attract new followers. And one last word on social media. Remember, it's a social platform, so keep it social. It's about relationships, not promotion. And just like all good communication, your goal should be to inform and inspire about 80% of the time, and making your asks for money or for time or even for advocacy limited to about 20% of the time. But in all these cases, don't fear metrics. That's what I want you to take away from listening to today's podcast. Because like I said before, they are simply a tool. They're not a judgment of your abilities. Let them show you what's working, what's not, and how you can tweak your outreach to become more effective in communicating on behalf of your nonprofit organization. That's what smart marketers do, and I believe you want and will do what will best serve your organization as a very smart marketer. That's it for today. Please join me again next week when we'll continue to discuss smart marketing strategies for your nonprofit. And please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. I've got some super bonus content that we'll be sharing in the podcast and in my Smart Marketing for Small Nonprofits Facebook group. I'd love to have you be a part of that too. So until next time, have a great week and please keep doing what you're doing to make the world a better place.